Vladimir Putin is moving deeper into the Sahel, this time not with troops or mercenaries, but through how the Sahel states communicate and defend their borders. For the first time ever, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger are planning a shared communications satellite, one designed to operate outside Western control, and Russia says it is ready to build it.
Something strange is happening in Ouagadougou, and it doesn't fit the story the world keeps telling about the Sahel. There are no emergency speeches, no foreign aid announcements, no dramatic military headlines. Instead, there are quiet meetings, sealed rooms, and one detail that feels completely out of place: a Russian cosmonaut sitting with Burkina Faso officials. Not a banker, not a diplomat, a space professional. That alone raises an uncomfortable question. Why would Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, countries constantly portrayed as overwhelmed by insecurity and economic pressure, suddenly start discussing orbit, telecommunications, and satellites? Why look upward when so many problems exist on the ground? And why is this conversation happening without fanfare, without Western partners, and without anyone explaining what exactly is being built? Let's find out. They are not running from enemies you can see, not armies, not sanctions, not even debt. Those are loud problems. The real pressure on Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger has been silent for decades. It lives inside cables, towers, servers, and signals that most people never think about. Every time a government official makes a call, sends a message, transfers funds, or coordinates security operations, that information does not stay inside national systems. It passes through infrastructure owned by foreign companies and foreign states. The Sahel speaks, but the voice travels through someone else's mouth. It decides, but the decision is processed by someone else's machine. This is not paranoia. It is the basic architecture of modern telecommunications. If a country does not own satellites, major data routes, and digital backbones, then by default, it is dependent. Even when leaders act independently, the environment they operate in is not theirs. Their internet is routed through European hubs. Their satellite imagery is provided by Western companies. Their cloud storage sits on servers governed by foreign law. Their encryption standards are designed elsewhere. This means the Sahel does not just import technology, it imports the rules of reality itself. Over time, this creates a strange kind of captivity. You can expel foreign troops, but your communications still pass through foreign systems. You can reject political pressure, but your financial flows still depend on external platforms. You can claim sovereignty, but your digital nervous system is outsourced. This is why recent Sahel leaders started feeling boxed in even after cutting military ties with the West. They removed visible control, but invisible control remained. Invisible control is more powerful because it shapes everything quietly without needing permission. What makes this even more dangerous is that digital dependence cannot be negotiated like diplomacy. You cannot debate with infrastructure. You either own it or you don't. If your emergency systems depend on foreign satellites, those systems can be disrupted. If your national broadcasting relies on rented space capacity, it can be cut. If your military coordination uses foreign networks, it can be monitored. None of this requires a conspiracy. It is simply how the system works when you don't control the pipes. For Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, this became impossible to ignore after they started facing coordinated pressure from multiple directions: sanctions, media narratives, financial isolation, and intelligence exposure. They realized that even when they changed alliances, they were still operating inside the same digital cage. Different players, same infrastructure. That's when the problem stopped being political and became structural. They were not just being opposed, they were being observed, filtered, and constrained at the level of information flow itself. This is why the satellite discussion feels urgent and defensive rather than ambitious. It is not about prestige or joining a space club. It is about escaping a system where your entire state exists inside someone else's technological ecosystem. A system where your sovereignty can be slowed, exposed, or quietly shaped without tanks, without bombs, without headlines. When you understand that, you realize they are not running toward space for glory. They are running from a reality where they cannot even see who is watching them. And once a country realizes that its biggest weakness is not on the ground, but inside the invisible layer that connects everything. The real question becomes, where do you go when the problem is not land, but the sky itself? Because every solution on the ground still leads back to the same trap. You can build more mobile towers, lay more fiber cables, expand more data centers, and still remain dependent, because all of it eventually connects to global systems that you do not control. The surface changes, but the backbone remains foreign. The Sahel can upgrade its infrastructure endlessly and still have its communications routed through European satellites, Western cloud services, and international gateways governed by external law. That is the structural problem they ran into. No matter how much they improved locally, the signal always left their hands at some point. This is where space becomes unavoidable. Satellites sit at the top of the digital food chain. They are the ultimate relay points for communications, broadcasting, navigation, and remote sensing. If you do not own satellites, you do not own the highest layer of your digital existence. You are always renting access to reality from someone else. That means your internet can be throttled, your broadcasting can be interrupted, your emergency systems can be disrupted, and your sensitive communications can be exposed. Not because someone is evil, but because you are structurally inside their system. The Sahel's leaders began to understand that modern power does not flow through ministries or even armies anymore. It flows through timing, visibility, and coordination. Whoever sees first, reacts first. Whoever controls the signal, controls the rhythm of events. Without independent space assets, a country is always late to its own crisis. It receives information after it has already passed through external filters. It learns about itself through someone else's sensors. This is not just inefficient. It is dangerous in a region dealing with security threats, border instability, and political pressure. Space also offers something no other domain offers: resistance to interference. On land, infrastructure can be seized. In the air, it can be restricted. But in orbit, once a satellite is operational, it becomes extremely difficult to neutralize without extreme escalation. It does not respond to trade agreements. It does not sit inside embassies. It cannot be pressured quietly. It responds only to those who hold its command systems. That makes it the only layer of infrastructure that cannot be easily politicized after the fact. For Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, this creates a simple strategic logic. If you want communications that cannot be cut, you put them in space. If you want data that cannot be filtered, you keep it off foreign servers. If you want coordination that cannot be monitored, you build your own relay points. Space is not an upgrade, it is an escape hatch. It allows a state to step outside the invisible architecture that governs modern dependency. This is why the satellite project is not framed as development, but as protection. It is about creating a zone of autonomy that exists beyond reach, a layer of reality that continues functioning even if diplomatic relations collapse, even if sanctions intensify, even if international pressure increases. The satellite is insurance against being digitally isolated or silently controlled. Once this logic becomes clear, the move towards space no longer feels strange or ambitious. It feels inevitable. Because if the problem lives in the highest layer of infrastructure, then the solution must also live there. And once you accept that orbit is the only place where true independence can be engineered, the next question becomes obvious. Why are 3 countries building one system instead of 3 separate ones? Because building 3 separate satellites would still leave them weak, just independently weak. Burkina Faso alone cannot sustain a full space program. Neither can Mali. Neither can Niger. Each one on its own would face the same limits: high costs, limited technical expertise, small coverage zones, and vulnerability to pressure. But together, they become something else entirely. Not 3 small countries with ambitions, but one regional system with strategic weight. A shared satellite turns individual limitations into collective strength. The moment they decided to act as a bloc, the logic changed. Cost becomes manageable because it is split. Technical knowledge becomes pooled. Coverage becomes regional instead of national. More importantly, political risk becomes distributed. If one country is pressured, the system still belongs to all 3. If one faces sanctions, The infrastructure cannot be isolated. The satellite stops being a national asset and becomes a regional one. Harder to target, harder to manipulate, harder to dismantle. But the real reason for a shared system goes deeper than economics. It forces integration at the most sensitive level: information. A shared satellite means shared communication protocols, shared emergency coordination, shared intelligence frameworks, shared standards for encryption, broadcasting, and data flow. It means Burkina Faso's security systems cannot function without Mali's participation. It means Niger's communication networks become structurally linked to the others. This is not cooperation by agreement, it is cooperation by design. The system itself makes separation impractical. This is radically different from how African regionalism has worked in the past. ECOWAS, the AU, and countless regional bodies were built on meetings, documents, and declarations. They relied on political will that could disappear overnight. This project relies on hardware. Once a satellite is launched and integrated, it does not care about mood swings, elections, or ideology. It forces alignment simply because the infrastructure is shared. The relationship becomes technical before it is political. For the Sahel, this is especially powerful. These three countries face similar threats, similar pressures, and similar isolation. But instead of each one trying to survive alone, they are constructing a single digital body, a system where borders still exist on maps, but information flows ignore them. A system where emergencies in one country automatically trigger coordination in the others. A system where communication is no longer national but regional by default. This is how real blocks are born, not through speeches, but through infrastructure that makes cooperation unavoidable. Once your signals pass through the same object in space, you are no longer three actors negotiating. You are one system operating. And that is why this project is so dangerous to the old order. It does not just give the Sahel technology, it gives it internal coherence. It turns fragmented states into a connected organism. It makes the idea of regional sovereignty physically real instead of rhetorically imagined. But building a shared system also introduces the most sensitive problem of all. Whoever helps you build it will inevitably shape how it works. They will touch the core. They will see the architecture. They will know how the system is structured. So the question that decides everything is not about satellites anymore. It is about trust. Who do you allow into the control room when you are building the most important infrastructure your region has ever owned? Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. Building space infrastructure is not like buying equipment. It means opening your entire digital blueprint to another power. Whoever helps design the system understands its structure, its weak points, its command logic, and its data routes. They see where signals enter, where they are stored, how they are encrypted, and how they are transmitted. That is why the partner choice is more sensitive than the technology itself. The wrong partner does not just help you build, they inherit permanent visibility. This is exactly what the Sahel wanted to avoid. Western space cooperation almost always comes with embedded systems. Not just hardware, but legal frameworks, regulatory compliance, security audits, interoperability standards, and data sharing structures. In simple terms, Western-built digital infrastructure is designed to plug into Western networks. It becomes legible to Western intelligence systems. Your data ends up under foreign jurisdiction. Your encryption standards are externally certified. Your architecture is transparent to institutions whose power depends on global visibility. For Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, that defeats the entire purpose. The satellite is being built to escape surveillance, not reorganize it. It is meant to reduce exposure, not formalize it. Accepting Western architecture would mean building independence on top of systems that were never designed for African autonomy in the first place. It would be like changing prison guards but keeping the same prison. Russia enters this space as something structurally different. It offers technical capability without systemic integration. It provides launch platforms, satellite engineering, and training, but does not embed African systems into Western digital governance frameworks. It does not require African data to sit inside foreign legal systems. It does not integrate intelligence agencies into technical oversight. It does not impose regulatory harmonization. The relationship is functional, not institutional. Tools are delivered, but the system remains locally owned. There is also a strategic reason this works. Russia itself is operating outside Western digital infrastructure due to sanctions and geopolitical isolation. That means its technologies are already built to function independently. Russian satellite systems are not optimized for NATO interoperability. They are optimized for autonomy. That makes them naturally compatible with countries whose primary goal is to disconnect from Western control, not negotiate with it. This is why the presence of a Russian cosmonaut in Ouagadougou matters more than any official speech. It shows that this is not symbolic diplomacy, it is technical planning. Engineers are involved, architectures are being discussed, command systems are being designed. The project is already past the stage of political imagination and has entered the stage of operational reality. What the Sahel is doing here is brutally pragmatic. It is not choosing Russia because it is friendly. It is choosing Russia because it is the only major space actor that does not automatically demand access to internal systems. China embeds financial ecosystems. The West embeds legal and intelligence ecosystems. Russia embeds hardware and leaves. For states trying to escape observation rather than manage it, that difference is everything. Once the control room is designed, once the architecture is locked, and once the satellite exists in orbit, the Sahel will no longer be building independence as a concept. It will be running as infrastructure. And that leads to the final uncertainty that nobody can answer yet. What actually changes inside the Sahel once this system is no longer theoretical, but alive? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The first thing that changes is not what people see, but what governments stop depending on. Once the AES has its own satellite, critical state communication no longer has to pass through foreign systems. Government networks can operate internally, military coordination can be encrypted within regional channels, and sensitive data can be stored without being routed through servers governed by external laws. This alone alters the balance of power quietly but fundamentally. The Sahel stops broadcasting its internal reality to the outside world by default. Then broadcasting itself changes. National television and radio no longer need to rent satellite space from foreign providers. Regional media can operate on the infrastructure they own. That means political messaging, emergency announcements, and public information are no longer vulnerable to service interruptions or contractual pressure. The region controls its own voice in a literal, technical sense. The next shift is in connectivity. Vast areas of the Sahel are too remote for fiber networks. A regional satellite allows mobile and internet services to reach zones that were previously disconnected or dependent on expensive foreign coverage. Schools, hospitals, and local administrations can connect directly to regional systems instead of relying on international gateways. Over time, this creates a digital geography that is internal rather than externally routed. Security operations also change structurally. Border monitoring, disaster response, and surveillance no longer rely on data supplied by external actors. Remote sensing becomes regional. Mapping becomes internal. Emergency coordination becomes faster because it no longer waits for international platforms to process information. In crises, this can mean the difference between response and paralysis. But the most powerful changes happen at the economic level. Once the Sahel owns its digital backbone, it becomes possible to build regional digital industries that were previously impossible. Financial platforms can operate without Western gateways. Data storage can be regional. Cloud services can exist inside Africa. Digital identity systems can be managed locally. These are not just services. They are foundations of modern economies. Whoever controls them controls where value accumulates. Over time, this shifts how young people relate to technology. Instead of building startups that depend on foreign infrastructure, they can build on regional platforms. Instead of exporting data and importing services, the region can retain both. This creates a feedback loop where technology reinforces sovereignty instead of undermining it. None of this will look dramatic at first. There will be no visible satellite effect in daily life. But slowly, decisions will become internal. systems will stop leaking outward. The Sahel will begin functioning as a region that processes its own information instead of exporting it by default. This is what real independence looks like in the digital age. Not flags or speeches, but infrastructure that quietly changes how reality itself is organized. And once a region begins living inside systems it owns rather than rents, the final question becomes unavoidable. Is this just a regional upgrade, or the beginning of a completely new model for African power? It might be, because this is the first time an African region is not fighting over symbols, but over systems. For decades, African independence focused on visible things: flags, borders, presidents, constitutions, elections, speeches at the UN. Those battles mattered, but they never touched the layer where real power was quietly reorganizing itself. While Africa was negotiating political recognition, the world was moving into a digital age where control no longer depended on who ruled, but on who owned the infrastructure that reality itself runs on. What the Sahel is doing is fundamentally different from every earlier African project. It is not trying to reform global institutions. It is not trying to get a better seat at someone else's table. It is not even trying to compete inside existing systems. It is building parallel ones. Systems that do not require approval, integration, or validation. A satellite in orbit does not ask the IMF for permission. It does not need Western markets to function. It does not care about diplomatic isolation. It exists as a piece of physical power that reshapes how everything below it operates. This is why this project feels quiet but dangerous. It does not challenge the global order with speeches. It bypasses it with engineering. It does not confront power directly. It dissolves dependence structurally. That is far more threatening than protest or resistance, because it removes leverage instead of arguing about it. Once a region owns its communications, data flows, and digital coordination, external influence becomes optional rather than automatic. What makes this especially significant is that it is happening in the Sahel, not in Africa's richest or most stable states. These are countries that were written off as permanently fragile, yet they are the ones attempting the deepest form of independence: infrastructural sovereignty. Not just controlling territory, but controlling how information, decisions, and coordination exist inside that territory. This also marks a generational shift. Previous African leadership fought to replace colonial rulers. This generation is fighting to replace colonial systems. It is not obsessed with recognition. It is obsessed with architecture. It is not asking how Africa looks to the world. It is asking how Africa functions without the world. That is a completely different mindset. If this model works, it becomes contagious. Other regions will not copy Burkina Faso's politics or Mali's ideology. They will copy the logic, build shared infrastructure, reduce external visibility, own the digital backbone, operate as systems rather than as dependent nodes. This is how real blocks are formed in the 21st century. Not through alliances on paper, but through shared hardware in orbit. The most important shift here is psychological. For the first time, African states are not starting with the question, how do we develop, but with the question, how do we stop leaking power? That is the mindset of serious actors, not clients. It moves Africa out of the role of recipient and into the role of architect. And once a region begins designing its own reality instead of negotiating space inside someone else's, the old categories collapse. Developing world stops making sense. Emerging market stops making sense. Those terms only exist when systems are imported. When systems are built internally, the hierarchy disappears. This is why the satellite is not a project. It is a signal. It tells the world that parts of Africa are no longer trying to rise within existing structures. They are trying to step outside them entirely. And the real question now is not whether this will succeed technically, but whether the rest of the world is ready for an Africa that is no longer plugged into its control systems at all. Let us know in the comment section. Are you ready? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.